everyone. Today is going to be a Classic Movie Monday again, and today I thought it would be best to discuss Gone with the Wind. Yes, Gone with the Wind. Probably one of the longest films ever made. Not only that, but one of the highest, in fact, the highest grossing film ever, pretty much, when it comes to box office numbers and how much it earned compared to any other film. And this is after you do inflation. So even though there have been films that have come out later that have maybe won more Academy Awards than Gone with the Wind, who are probably have been able to earn probably as much money as Gone with the Wind. Ultimately, Gone with the Wind still seems to maintain that spot of earning the most in box office history, and this is after you calculate everything after inflation. So it's all on how you work in the numbers, but basically that's pretty much how Gone with the Wind stands among the movie-going community, and it's fairly understandable to see why. It was one of the first films shot in color too, along with Wizard of Oz, which came out the same exact year, and it's actually based upon a really well-known and well-praised novel of the same name by Margaret Mitchell. And for the most part, it does seem like it seems to maintain itself as part of the movie-going culture, especially the American culture, especially since the novel and as well as the movie focus in on a time within American history where things were starting to evolve and change, and I think you kind of see that too with the way movies have been made, and I think gives it a fairly legitimate stance for this movie to be recognized as a classic. But basically, in case anybody has not seen Gone with the Wind or has even heard of it, it's basically about a particular woman by the name of Scarlett O'Hara, and basically she is a part of the O'Hara family who's fairly wealthy southern plantation owners for the most part. They seem to own a pretty good chunk of land, and they sort of live that southern rich lifestyle where there's parties and there's this whole group of different people who basically come together, and they're seen as a fairly high status and just well recognized among other southern plantation owners and rich southern families. So for the most part, it does though follow Scarlett in particular, who is played by Vivien Leigh, and Scarlett in particular is a fairly she's an interesting character, to say the least, because on the one side she has these very, I think, likable qualities, and different qualities than we've seen in a lot of movies where women were the lead protagonists, because for the most part Scarlett's character is fairly stubborn. She's independent. She's very self-centered, very, and also vain, you could say, to a certain extent. So she's not really like a lot of other women, or a lot of other women characters that were constructed throughout this time period in the late 1930s. She's nowhere near like somebody like Snow White or somebody like Dorothy. No, this is a different character, different mindset. And it does seem like she has these qualities that we haven't really seen before within this time period. And I think that's why a lot of people probably recognize the film a lot, is because of, in particular, Scarlett O'Hara's character, because her character isn't really like a lot of the other women that were, or how women were really portrayed during this time period as characters. So it's fairly interesting to see that sort of change, and you'll kind of see where, when I explain the plot, why there's these certain factors within her personality, and that kind of goes with all the people that are surrounded by her. But for the most part, it follows her character and basically her journey through the time period that she's in, which is again pre, during, and after the Civil War. And it also follows her infatuation with one of the other characters, whose name is Ashley Wilkes, and he is played by Leslie Howard. And for the most part, it's their relationship, although you do get a sense that it seems genuine. You can kind of tell at how fairly manipulative Scarlett is regarding their relationship, and how she kind of wants Ashley to herself and doesn't really put what he wants first. And you kind of see how that really ends up impacting her character, especially when Ashley decides to marry, in the way beginning of the movie, somebody else. So it's that kind of a jealousy that she has throughout the entire movie. This entire movie is really based upon that whole past that she has with this character. And not only does she have this kind of problem to deal with, as well as the problem of the Civil War and how the South is pretty much getting its patootie kicked at certain points. She also deals with another male character with the name of Rhett Butler, and he is played by none other than Clark Gable. And for the most part, Rhett Butler's character is, for the most part throughout the entire movie, is trying to convince her that that she loves his character. That's really what Clark Gable's trying to do throughout the entire thing. And it's interesting to see the character interactions, in particular between Clark Gable's character as well as Vivian's character, because they sort of have this kind of love-hate thing going on that you see in a lot of couple movies today, probably. And it is rather amusing to watch and to observe, but it's just one of those kinds of relationships where it's just different than a lot of maybe traditional couples were at the time. And you'll kind of see how the way Ashley and his wife interact is completely different than how Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara interact together. So you will kind of see that difference, and how the how couples interact maybe differently than some other couples do. And that's really what's the centerpiece for the most part of this movie. But not only the relationships between the characters, but also the land as well. There's this land that Scarlett's father owns called Terra. And basically, at one point, Terra gets completely demolished by the North once the North invades the South. And it's really up to Scarlett to sort of make sure that the land can be sort of rebuilt again, and that they can have food and resources, and you'll see how that's also fairly impacting those particular circumstances are fairly have a fairly big impact upon her character. And I think for the most part that's really all you need to understand plot-wise, because I don't want to give too much away. But I will say, like I said sort of to the beginning of this video, this movie is long. It's I believe, if you don't count the intermission part, it just clocks under 4 hours. Yes, it is really long. And these older movies, they often did them, I think, sort of like plays, in that they would have an intermission. So literally at one point in the movie, you will see how it stops, and then it has basically an intermission written, and then with that there's a background. I believe it's of Terra, and basically that's really how these intermissions sort of worked. And so yes, you could probably fast forward the intermission, especially when you're not seeing anything, you're just seeing a picture with, I believe, intermission is written on it or something, or and yeah, it is kind of long, and I think though that was for a reason, because the novel that it's based on is fairly long. I would say fairly long. I believe it's over 1,000 pages, the book. So it does make sense that this movie is rather long. I guess they did really want to put as much as they could in there. But for the most part, I think that's really all of the elements that are really important. Now, as to whether you like this film is not only based upon how long it is, but whether or not you sort of like the characters. But for the most part, the acting, as well as the things like the cinematography and the score are just really, I think, well done. I really enjoy the score. I think the score is really beautiful. But I think people will probably have the most problems with, I think when it comes to it, is basically the two main characters, Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara, because of the fact that they have both of these characters have really major flaws, and some people may not be as willing to forgive those certain flaws, especially Scarlett O'Hara's stubbornness and her spoiled, self-centered behavior may not be some people's cup of tea, and that can be fairly impacting, because again, she is the main character of the story. So if you don't like Scarlett O'Hara, this may suck a little bit of the enjoyment out of it. And I have to say that although her character kind of has these moments of where she is rather rude and just comes off as more of an annoyance, and I can understand why, because I sort of felt like that watching the film. Then it does kind of suck certain things out of liking her character. But ultimately, even though the character does have issues, I think she still has qualities that you could admire. I think there's still things that are likable about her. It's just that not everything you may necessarily care for in her character, and that's how I kind of got away from the film thinking. But again, there's probably others who are totally fine with the way she's portrayed. But for me, I think that was just kind of an issue because of sometimes I think she would just be so overboard and do things that I think were just more on the side of rude and snobbish and not really productive to the film as a whole. So I think there is that flaw in that sense. But I guess you could say that that's ultimately what who her character is. I think that just depends upon the audience's perception of her, and to whether or not you feel that these qualities that she has that may not be as likable, you could get past and see past those things. As far as Clark Gable is concerned, I thought he was awesome throughout the entire movie. Can he be a bit of a jerky McJerk sometimes? Sure, but I think he is a lot more likable actually than Scarlett O'Hara. I think he just has a fairly likable energy on screen. I think he really, you can really tell that he's trying to put in a lot of effort within Scarlett's relation with in the relationship that he has with Scarlett, as well as with the daughter that they eventually have in the film. I think there is a lot of heart within his character, even though he does have these flaws. Again, at one point you'll see him that he's a bit of a drinker, and that he can be maybe a little bit, maybe the fact that his love for Scarlett kind of makes him a little bit not so right in the head, and then resorting to drinking and things like that. You can see how impacting her character is on him, but I think he does seem to be a little bit, and by a little bit I mean a good portion of a little bit, more likable than Scarlett's character, I think. And I think even my dad had a hard time watching it with me because of Scarlett's character, and he just kept saying like how spoiled and how mean she is, and I go, yeah, she's not really the most likable character. So there will be that. Just be prepared. If you don't mind a spoiled, self-centered, independent, stubborn woman as your lead lady, then you won't mind this movie. But if you've got issues with that, that might be a problem. But for the most part, despite whatever flaws the film may have and the story as a whole, I think it still maintains that level of a classic because I think the acting is just too good. I think all the other elements within the film are just too good, and it's kind of interesting to see them touch on this particular time period in the South, and it's overall, I think, a very interesting film. And even though it is rather long, and it does have maybe these character issues, I think in the end you still get a very decent film adaptation of a fairly long book. But I think that's really the most that I can say about it for the most part, because I think from everything I told or already explained in this video is really all you need to know going into the film. It is rather long. There are points where it does get touchy-feely, and it gets intense at times, especially when you're dealing with the Civil War, and you'll see how the Civil War really and the time period really impacts the way things end up, or how things evolve throughout the story. And I think for the most part that's really all you need to understand. And I think if you can get behind and past certain things that may be the flaws, then I think you can have a very satisfying experience watching this movie. But again, it is an older film, so again it does move at a more slower pace, and they do have a lead lady that again is not really like a lot of other lead ladies during this time period. So whether or not you take that with a positive or a negative aspect, that's totally up to you to decide. But for the most part, I still rather enjoy it, despite me not particularly caring for certain aspects of Scarlett's character, and me, maybe having issues in the fact that it is a little long. I still find it rather enjoyable because there is a lot of good moments, I think, a lot of fairly impacting moments, and a lot of moments that really resonate, I think, with the film and with filmmaking as a whole. So I would definitely recommend the movie to anyone who is interested. But I think that's all I can say, and until next time.